ahead, John. Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you. Good. Thank you, Christine. And yes, welcome everyone today to Believe It or Not. We're going to be talking about information literacy and adult learners. And before I move away from this, and just take a quick look at the example I put up there. That one is something we may have thought a year ago was true, but just one of those early examples in relation to the coronavirus of that misinformation, potential fake news, and that type of thing. So again, welcome. I am John Trerotola, and I teach in Robbinsdale in the adult academic program. My main area of teaching is with GED and adult diploma. My specialty and passion, so to speak, is definitely in the social studies. And I also teach the English language arts as well, and have learned quite a bit myself over the years teaching that. I have had a few years experience in the advanced ESL classroom, which was invaluable to me at that point, and also then going back into the GED classroom too. So please feel free to use the chat box for any questions or comments. And if I don't see them right now, of course, I'll take a look at the chat log later. And if there are some questions that weren't answered or comments, I will be more than glad to reply to those. And also, yeah, do not hesitate to chat or share your classroom experiences with any of the highlighted resources. We're going to be reviewing or highlighting a number of resources and strategies today. And if there is one you're like, oh, I've used that one with great success when talking about media literacy or information literacy. Or on the other side, if you say that one I've used and didn't work so well at my level or in my classroom, please chat that out too. And a good way to share these type of resources and strategies with each other. And again, thank you so much for attending today. All right, before we start, I'm just going to read our quote. Confidence in the media is at an all-time low in what commentators are referring to as the era of post-truth reporting. Putting this presentation together, the area of information literacy has always been an interest to me. And it was when I was putting some of this together, wonderful quotes that I found, and not just quotes for quote's sake, but ones that really do hit home with the idea of information literacy, misinformation, fake news. All things that have been around since the beginning of media. But as we know in our recent time, in recent years, it has become so much more prevalent and such a topic that is so important for us as educators and for students and just for everyone in general. So before we start today, it is becoming more difficult to spot the real news from the fake. Can you do so? Just going to take a second with this. Feel free to chat your answers to number 1 and number 2. And take a look at number 1. Which one is fake? Letter A, scientists create a plant that cannot die. B, scientists to create stem cell burger. C, scientists create water-activated self-folding straw. And number 2, A, flood of caramel released by Brazilian sugar fire. B, sea monster washes ashore in New Zealand. Or C, weathermen trapped by avalanche. Mid-report. They say chat a little bit. Maybe I'll have Christine take a look at the chat as they come in just a second and kind of tell me when we get to each one what everyone is thinking is the fake headline. What do we think on number one, everyone? Which one is fake? Christy, what's
It's all over the board. We've got A, we've got B, we've got C.
and probably
It
the
seems like C might be the most chosen one, but not by much.
Okay, good. And that actually is kind of the point of this, is that it's becoming more and more difficult. These are recent headlines from the last year, and it's becoming more and more difficult just by the headlines, which sometimes is all a person reads, becoming more difficult to spot that fake headline. So in number one, it is actually letter A. Scientists create a plant that cannot die. That is true. I could do a little extra research on that one to see how far it got, but that one is a piece of fake news, a fake headline. Actually, my wife said, "Oh, I remember the stem cell burger one," and that one I had to verify. And then the water activated straw, I actually remember that one. Don't ask me how, but it's odd enough that that is true.
And John, for number
Yes.
two, it seems like the most common answer chosen is B, but I do want to give Lee Obermiller a gold star for saying, I will not choose one until I can research the items.
Very good. And Lee, yes, welcome Lee. Yes, for sure. And a good point. And the point that we will be seeing after this little fun exercise, the more serious a point of reminding not only ourselves, but our students and each other of that important part of researching it and not just believing everything you read initially. And actually, number two, it was the weatherman, the weather person trapped by avalanche mid-report. Not true. Kind of a fun image, but yeah, that one is not true. The Brazilian sugar fire, that one I do remember. And the sea monster one, that one just may be a matter of word choice on that one as well. But C is a fake headline. But as I mentioned before, the idea of this, these are all fun headlines and they can be humorous, but then we do need to step back and say, wait a minute, is this true? What do I need to do to prove that it is a piece of real news or not? And that type of thing. So next time you see a headline, read on. But then the point then too is that the rest of the story may also be some type of misinformation or fake as well. So it's the idea that it's not just headlines, it can be the entire story. And then the issue of that story being passed on through other methods to friends, family, and eventually the world. So we do have such little time, as always, and so much to discuss. But we are today going to define information and media literacy. It's two words that we hear, especially with the North Star Digital Assessment. There is a module called Information Literacy, and kind of what it is and why. Is it a critical skill for our students in adult basic education? And we'll briefly talk about those challenges for our ABE students as mass consumers of information. And a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today, of course, are student focus, but also apply to us all. We're all mass consumers of information, and that constant bombardment of information. And is it real? Is it not real? Is some of it real, but not all of it? Those types of things that are happening to all of us. We will then spend a good part of our time today assessing a variety of instructional strategies and some standard aligned resources related to information literacy. I have chosen some that I have used in the classroom, and these are ones that can be adapted for various levels and modified in many ways to apply to your level of students. And then at the end, we will break out into, just briefly, probably by that time, some breakout groups, and you'll have a chance then to share with each other, taking some of the resources and strategies that we talked about today and applying them, coming up with some ideas on how they can be applied or used in your classroom. And then most importantly, hearing from each other and talking about other successes, challenges with media literacy and this whole idea of fake news and its impact on our students, and chat with each other a little bit about that in a breakout room and learn from each other. And also too, many of these resources during this time of teaching now, we will talk about, and we'll see some of the resources, how they can be adapted into the digital classroom. And then of course that movement forward into the hybrid classroom and or in-person classroom. The good news is that many of the resources, or most of them that we will highlight today, are applicable for all types of classrooms. So information and media literacy. We hear this term, fake news a lot, but these are all part of information and media literacy. And both terms kind of go together. We may see some called information literacy, see some called media literacy, especially when you are looking for strategies, looking for resources. If you do search under both of those, there is a plethora of items out there for us all to use. So when we hear these terms, just basically think of it as the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication. And it's that, especially applied to our students, it's that analysis, that evaluation side that are important in that definition. And also all forms of communications. I will highlight a little bit later, but sometimes we think, fake news, misinformation only in the written word, but think about how ideas can be manipulated in the visual form as well, in charts, in graphs, in pictures. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. And why is it important? It is not only essential for that academic success of our students, but also, for them to have success in the workplace. And at the end of the day, that just to be more informed participant in society. There's that civics connection that I'm going to talk about in just a minute. That idea to be more informed citizens, we need to be more evaluative. We need to analyze the media that is coming at us on a 24/7 cycle. And that evaluating part is the major challenge for our students and for us because of that 24/7 flow of data every minute of the day. And then just fake news, just completely fake news, made up news versus, just some misinformation depending on biases and agendas and that type of thing. And there's that deliberate misinformation. And then there's just misinformation that I heard this and then passing it along. It's misinformation, but then it's that cycle of passing it along where it goes from being misinformation back to being information, even though it started out as not, or as something that has been proven not to be true. And also fact versus opinion as well, that opinions are coming off as the fact, as the news. It must be true, when in the end it is an opinion. And generating this movement of information is, of course, social media. And we're going to see in a second, and of course, as we all know, the impact of social media on our lives every day. So how we consume information is changing too. When putting this together, this was fascinating. And I know we've all probably seen kind of some reports and data and statistics on where information is coming from, how we, our students, us, are consuming information. And what I'd like to do is just a quick poll, please. I will put that up on the screen in just a second here. And the poll is, if you could participate, is on where you get your news from in 2021. So let me launch the poll here, and we'll just take a minute to participate. There we are. So let me launch this. All right, we'll take just a minute or so. So if you could take a look. So in 2021, where do you primarily get your news from? Local TV, websites, radio, cable TV, network nightly TV, print newspapers, and social media. Interesting. Yeah, we'll let her go. We'll let her go for about a minute here or so. Or just as when we get to, yes, thank you for your participation in the poll. Yeah, we'll give it just a few. It looks like we're just about have everyone. I'll give it a few more seconds. Interesting.
John?
Yes.
We have a couple questions, same question here. Online newspaper, would you consider that a website?
Ooh, good question. Good question. That one, the online newspaper, I would consider that more of a print newspaper. That one, yeah, I would, especially if it's something like the Star Tribune or a news source that has been, an established news source. I would call that one a little bit more of a print newspaper, but just a different way of looking at it. Good. All right. All right. Shall we end our polling? Let's end our polling. Thank you for your participation. Let me share. I'm going to end the polling, and then we'll share the results with everyone so you can see those. So there we are. So look at, yeah, we had, I'd say small percentage, our biggest percentage is with that website and apps. And then following that is social media down at the end. And of course, cable TV. Yes, print newspapers. And that is that kind of print newspapers, websites. Yeah, if it's, the Star Tribune, kind of the Star Tribune online versus in print, or I'm hoping are kind of the same area. So local TV, of course. And then, yes, the network nightly TV. That, of course, was something I remember in the past as the source of information. If it was said on one of the three networks, it must be true. All right, thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing those results. And excellent. There we are. So you may not be alone in where you are getting your information, your news from. I put just these up. I know they're probably very small on your screen, but just to highlight that idea of where we as a society, and again by age, we can break it down even more, definitely younger generations are relying on social media more for their news. And yeah, just an overwhelming majority of Americans get at least some local news online. 1 in 5 US adults get their political news primarily through social media. So it's even that breaking down more into, the type of news. You may rely on one source for one thing and on another source for another. But that was an interesting statistic as well when it comes to political news and its connection with social media. So these are all just reports from, a lot of them are from the Pew Research Center. They always do such a nice job. These are things you can definitely put up for your students as well. Many, if you haven't done so already, please poll your students similar to what we just did. I have done that, and it's amazing, yeah, that lining up their results with some of these charts and graphs as well, and they're all definitely very, very close. What I want to do is show a very brief video. This is from C-SPAN, C-SPAN Classroom. We'll talk a little bit more about this resource a little bit later, but this is just a good, it's about 3.5 minutes, a good discussion from a gentleman that is talking about misinformation and fake news. It's just good for us today at this moment as a warm-up into our discussion. And also, this is something or related type videos that you can use in the classroom as well with your students. So let me bring that up and we'll take a listen to that and just make sure that works here. Good, let me get that into the area here. So this gentleman, yes, is going to talk about the modern news consumption and fake news. And as I say, really a good just overview of kind of where we're at right now with these two topics.
Broken and too often a scam. You go on to say many now make money selling fake headlines, fake controversies, and even fake news. So how is media broken, and define fake news for us?
Yeah, in terms of media being broken, so much. If you go to most websites, so many things are being done sort of for business purposes. Those pop-up ads, those banner ads, the slow load time, the fact that you have to click 3 or 4 times to get through an entire article. Most of those things were designed because that's what businesses need to do to drive as much inventory as possible. What we said is, no, let's simplify the process. Like, if you're going to start from scratch and you're going to produce what you know the news consumer needs, what would you do? You would make it much easier to navigate. You would kill those annoying pop-up ads. You would allow people to just stay on your one platform in your stream and consume the news they want, and make it easy to share, because so much of news consumption, particularly for people my age and younger, it's all about sharing it through these different ecosystems, whether it's Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook or Apple News. It's just a different world right now in terms of how people are getting their news. In terms of fake news, I describe fake news, or the description would be anything that's not real, right? Any news that is manufactured, some of it maliciously, some not. Often you go to websites and people use these headlines that are sort of, tricks for clicks. These ideas of you read this really audacious headline and then the story doesn't deliver. And so what we're trying to do is we need to earn the viewers, the readers' trust. And you do that by delivering content that matters, in not playing those games, either for editorial reasons or for business reasons.
That fake news, that term fake news, certainly a term our viewers have heard a lot more of during the Trump administration. Do you think that President Trump has been good for journalism, good for the media business?
Good for, those are two different questions. In terms of as a business proposition, he probably has been good for journalism and for media, because there's a lot more public interest in the journalism that we're producing. In terms of whether he's good for journalism, it's hard to argue with a straight face that he is. He spends a lot of time talking about clamping down on journalists, about clamping down on access, about clamping down on media entities that are writing things that he doesn't like. And while he hasn't really followed through on any of those things, rhetorically, I don't like it, because I care a lot about information. I care a lot about journalism. And you talk about fake news, and I'm worried about fake news, and no doubt it's a problem, and I think it was certainly a problem in the run-up to our last election. You're seeing it being a problem even in the German elections, and a little bit on the margins in the French election that just took place. But what really worries me is that people don't believe real news. That there's so many people, you probably hear it from some of your callers, I hear it from lots of friends, lots of family members, they don't believe that there's just a truth anymore, that a fact's a fact. People seem to want things that validate their opinion or make them feel better about their own ideological views. And to me, that's dangerous. Like, if there's one thing I could do, if I could wave a magic wand, I wish we could get people to understand that sometimes a fact is a fact and that the world is a complex place, and that if we could just settle on the fact that sometimes truth is truth and then try to make better decisions and get our politicians to make better decisions, I think the outcome for my kids would be a heck of a lot better than everyone just getting worked up, getting on Facebook and belly aching, and then everyone getting into their own bubble and believing their own alternative.
Nice. All right. All right, let me go back here, hold please. So yes, hopefully that gentleman did make such good points about just the whole idea of fake news, and then that point at the end here about the whole idea that we just expect now kind of our news and information to be inaccurate. And yeah, this may be very small on your screen, but this study that shows that half of social media news consumers expect the news there to be largely inaccurate. And that idea that if I'm reading it's probably not true, or it may be true. And this is the challenge that is there. This is why it is so important to teach these literacy skills, these information literacy skills, these media literacy skills to our students. And I had a student a few weeks ago, or actually a few months ago now, during the election cycle. And she said, I just read on Facebook that there never has been a Republican president. And, that type of question was there is a good example of, a student that is using Facebook, using some type of social media, probably for news, seeing something, and then, something that is inaccurate, but then, questioning, which is good about that, but just an example of the inaccuracies that are out there in news, and particularly in social media. So our goal as teachers is to give students at all levels those skills to become more critical readers, and not just readers, but listeners and thinkers in this age of mass information. And just briefly, the information literacy, media literacy, and its connection with the standards is definitely emphasized, and especially those reading standards, not to get too specific, but that anchor to in the speaking and listening standards about evaluating information in diverse media formats. So that idea of not just written, but diverse media formats, and reminding us that it can come orally and also through visuals as well. And I admit, when I'm planning instruction and its relation with ACEs and TIFF, I'm always guilty of not recognizing sometimes the connections there, but most definitely there are, especially with those soft skills that are so emphasized in ACEs and TIFF, and using information to draw conclusions and make decisions, not only in school, but in the workplace as well. And of course, North Star, there is that connection, and North Star and its various modules, but that information literacy module on North Star, assessing one of those outcomes, one of those goals is assessing the reliability of sources and synthesizing information, not just from one source, but from multiple sources. And we'll see here in a minute some resources that will help with that. And remember too, that along with a lot of the specialized resources, those are very helpful in our classroom experiences, but to teach information and media literacy, sometimes all we need is just that newspaper, television. We can turn on something, we can record something and show it, we can listen to something. So it doesn't take a lot of specialized resources, but we will see some out there in just a second that will definitely help with our journey into this curriculum. So before we get into that, I have a quote here, and I just want to get your thoughts. It is a a quote that means a lot to me, and I just wanted to share it with you as well. And then also just get your thoughts. We won't be able to share too much, maybe a little bit later in our chat rooms. We can think about this too, but I'm going to read the quote and then in your chat box, and Christine will take a look at some responses and maybe just share out a few. When students can't identify the quality of a source, how can they make good decisions about how to vote or form their own opinions on important topics like healthcare, housing, and economic policy? That quote, as I say, really resonates with me. That whole idea, again, it's getting to that civics and community connection with being more informed about our media, more evaluative, being more critical consumers of media and information, and, having impact individually, but also on families and communities as well. So let's just take a minute, please. And I put up a few sentence stems up there if you want to react to this quote using one of those, or if you want to simply chat, I agree. I think this is important. I disagree. Maybe there's more to it than what's in this quote. But let's just take a minute to think about this. This is kind of the goal, our goal as teachers, and kind of where we're going with information literacy in our classroom, why it's important to teach it. But just take a minute. And any thoughts on this one? Let's say, feel free to use your chat box. All right, yes, I always hate to interrupt any type of writing or thought, but just take a few seconds more, please. Thank you for participating. Maybe finish your thought, please. Christine, what do you think? Would you mind?
Not at all. As they're coming in, some really great things about primary documents. The students who can find and read primary documents have better access to the truth. Resonating with people because students are often fact-checked with their teachers, and thankfully we provide places where they feel safe to do so. This isn't just an academic skill, it's a skill that needs to be taught to all people. And just this idea that it's gonna get harder and harder, and it's important that everyone have these skills as we go into the future. So some great ideas here.
Thank you, Christine. Yes, and I'll be anxious to look those over myself too. And thank you, for your thoughts on this, and in 100% agreement with them. And we'll leave this idea with that idea of it's not just an academic skill. Yeah, it is for us all as well. And tying in with that, our lives may depend on it being critical consumers of mass information. And in addition to many other useful items, the National Association for Media Literacy Education, there is a group that is devoted to this topic. The website is here. The slides have will have live links. I also have a resource list as well that has been or will be provided to everyone that has all of the resources that we talk about today with their links. But this one is especially good. I actually just found this one while putting things together for today. It's something I'm going to use though immediately. Let's just take a quick look at this resource. Here we are. Let's take a quick look at this resource. I will just scroll down, and this association has two excellent lessons on, and other resources as well, on how to spot COVID-19 misinformation. I just want to show you this just for a minute because it is so good and something that can be used in all levels of classroom. What they have done is put together a wonderful resource that starts out with a podcast, so those listening skills are involved, on how to spot misinformation regarding COVID-19, and then a brief video as well, and then also an entire classroom guide on how this can be used in your classrooms and various strategies to use parts or all of it. And just one more thing I want to show before we leave this is this graphic. That is just a one-page, can you spot COVID-19 misinformation? And you know, there's so many topics out there where misinformation and information are critical, but of course, at this very moment, what more critical topic than the pandemic and the misinformation and tying in with vaccines and that type of thing, and seeing this, or I can see this as an entire, an entire lesson or lessons just on this very topic. That is so timely. So yeah, this one I just wanted to point out to everyone. And again, these will all be noted in the resource list as well. All right. So it is time, speaking of resources, it is time to review some of those classroom ready resources and some strategies. We're going to just look at some in general and look at some a little more specifically in our time remaining. And then as we are looking at those, as I say, I want to give a little time at the end for you to maybe take, one, don't have to take them all, take one of these resources and think about how it can be applied to your classroom. Let me just read this quote. Our students are speeding along the information superhighway without a license. Before letting them loose, let's make sure they've passed the driver's test. And yeah, could not be a better quote. Again, we could put everyone instead of just students in that first line as well. And this is from Sam Weinberg of Stanford. And we're going to see something in a little bit here, some curriculum he has put together that I have called the gold mine of media information literacy curriculum that we can all use that will ensure our students to be much more critical in their evaluation of all types of mass information. So what I've done when I am considering a discussion, a curriculum planning in information and media literacy, I use this approach. This is just an approach. It's one that definitely doesn't have to be followed, step by step. But something I do in my classroom is first take a look at those big topics in information media literacy, kind of like what we did today. What is it? Why is it important? Becoming comfortable with those elements, becoming comfortable with the vocabulary as well. It's like I've heard fake news, what does it mean? Or I've heard the word deep fake and some of those vocabulary terms that are associated with information literacy. So starting kind of with that big picture, and then moving into those more in-depth lessons and activities that really start to challenge students to critically evaluate print and digital information sources. So there's that part. And then if for mine, it is applicable where to start to get a little bit even more specialized with instruction, with finding and evaluating evidence, and especially reading those arguments that are necessary for the GED essay, or if a student is writing some type of argumentative adult diploma essay as well. So most of my time is in all of these different areas, but and at different levels too. I can go from the very strong lessons on finding and evaluating evidence to ones that are a little bit more, take the broader approach and give students strategies when consuming information. And before we go on, someone made a good comment to that one quote about how do we expect our students, to function in society. And it's interesting. I just read something that really hit home with me, that we as teachers, when engaging with students who believe a piece of information that is unsupported by facts, we as teachers need to demonstrate that willingness to listen. This part is the part here. I'm just reading this from this article. Trying to tell someone what to believe is never going to work, but we can offer to help someone explore their ideas. In the end, educating students about facts and methods of verification has been shown to work. And here now we're going to look at a few of those resources. That one, yeah, that was such a good article that you can tell someone it's not true a million times, and it may or may not work, but giving everyone those tools, educating ourselves, our students on those methods of verification will hopefully be the ticket to help with that. All right. Let's first take a look at some big picture topics and resources and strategies. And what we're going to do is I've highlighted a few resources that I have used and a few ways too that I've either used in my classroom or ways for all of us to consider using in perhaps our own individual classrooms. I provided the general website for the resources, but usually it is as simple as putting in just fake news as a search term into any of them, or information literacy or media literacy, and you'll definitely be directed to the materials and activities. We'll just review some of these briefly, and then I'm going to pull out one from this, and we're going to take just a minute more in-depth look at what there is to offer. So when planning, consider resources like Breaking News English, ESL Library, News ELA, Nearpod, and SERP. All 5 of these I have used depending on my class at that time, and many of them may be, for example, Breaking News English, ESL Library. Is that just for ESL students? No, it is for all students. All of these can be adapted in many, many different ways. So I've just put a few ideas out there with some of these sources. There is a deep fake article in Breaking News English. Consider using that. Students can listen to that article or use the article to practice multiple grammar skills. I've also used News ELA to show students that fake news is not new. It has been there. There are some excellent articles on the evolution of fake news throughout history, not only in the US, but in the world. The Nearpod for emerging readers to start at that point, or, as we mentioned maybe the other day when looking at this, that, emerging readers or others, that difference between pretend and real. It may have to start, what does fake mean? What does that mean? And start from there. And something I have done in my classroom, kind of to start off a discussion or unit or a plan on information literacy, is from SERP. There is an excellent activity that asks the question, today's news, information, or entertainment? And for those that have used SERP, it is an excellent resource for reading skills, vocabulary skills. It all starts out with a group of targeted vocabulary words, and then also takes the topic and applies it to math content, science content, and then basically ends up with a writing piece as well in answer to the initial question. So if that is a new resource or one that you're not familiar with, definitely check it out. And out of all of these, we're going to talk about ESL Library in just a second here. All the other ones, though, are free resources that can be used.
Good. That was a question that came up in the chat. John, was don't ESL Library and Newsela require subscription? And Newsela is both, because you can get to a lot of their content that's free. Do you want to say anything about ESL Library as far as, is it the fee, or is it fairly nominal?
It is very, yes, it's fairly ESL Library, and that's what we're going to focus or take a look at, just a lesson in ESL Library that applies to us today. And ESL Library is an amazing resource. It does require a subscription. However, it is a nominal fee for this. It is $84 a year. And before our district, fortunately, got a subscription, I actually bought it myself, and it was worth every penny for the year. I was using this when I was in the advanced ESL classroom. And for those that know ESL Library, it ranges. It's all different levels, all different skills related to just everything. Reading, writing, grammar, anything, speaking, listening that you can imagine. So I would highly recommend it if that is a potential option. And let me show you a lesson that is in ESL Library. And then if this is a new resource, you can kind of get the idea of the activities that they have. Let's see if this comes up. It does. So we're just going to take just a second to take a look at this. So for example, this is a lesson on fake news. They have these things called discussion starters that have then various ways. It's adaptable for the digital classroom, also then for the in-person classroom as well. And as I say, just a very brief look. Many of their lessons follow a similar format, and starting with some pre-reading, some vocabulary preview, and going from there. Readings range from, multi-paragraph to shorter to even longer. And then the activities vary. There are comprehension questions. Yeah, it's not like every lesson in ESL Library follows this exact format, which is the wonderful part of it. And some vocabulary review. And then this one here then for types of questions, question words. If you're working on question words in your classroom, what a perfect lesson to not only work on the question type words, but then also tie it in with a discussion about fake news. So definitely, this is one lesson. There was another one on fact versus opinion that I use actually in the GED classroom. So again, ESL Library, not just for the ESL classroom, but can be used at all levels. All right, so let's take a look at a few more resources and then one other one in a little bit more in-depth way. C-SPAN Classroom, Civic Online Reasoning, our graphic organizers for our GED instructors, iCivics, and ListenWise. This group of resources, again, I have used all of these. these are all, and yeah, many of these, as Christine mentioned on Newsy LA, you have your kind of base free version, and then of course some upgrades and premium versions. Same with ListenWise, that has a base version where it has a podcast library, and then of course can pay more for more specific lessons. But iCivics, Civic Online Reasoning, C-SPAN, all free resources. C-SPAN for the classroom, that was that first video that we watched. And the nice thing about C-SPAN Classroom, I mean, that video, yeah, was a very specific video, but what they have for multiple levels is video clips, kind of like that one. Consider flipping your classroom. And actually, I'm considering doing this year, sending students one of those video clips, having them watch it. They average, 3-4 minutes, just that right amount of time, and then use that class time to discuss. For our GED classrooms, I have used those many. They have such good graphic organizers, and I'm sure all of us have our graphic organizers for reading arguments, identifying and evaluating, but helping students map out that evaluative part. iCivics, if you have not been to iCivics, please do. It is there for everything civic related, everything government related, but they also have a media literacy curriculum as well. And not only with lessons, but they have this great news literacy game. What better way to do it, and especially in the digital world now, where students have to fight viral deception and false reporting. And it's definitely for adults as well. It's not at a very low, children level when it kind of sounds like that. Definitely can be used in the adult classroom, and I've used it very, very much. And ListenWise too, to get those listening skills. Again, listening to something. ListenWise has those podcasts. Use those. Think about using those to evaluate the information and evidence that you hear. What we're going to look at is the gold mine of media literacy resources. And this is a new curriculum that was put out by the Stanford History Education Group. If any of you have attended some of my past sessions on social studies, that is a whole nother curriculum that can be used in the social studies world for all types of topics in American history. But aside from that, or along with that, I should say, is an entire new curriculum that has been put out by Stanford on civic online reasoning. And it's definitely worth a few minutes to highlight that one. Let's see if that came up. Good, it did. And I'm just going to walk everyone through the curriculum very, very briefly, and will highly recommend that you go to this one on your own. And as you can see, lessons and assessments. What they have done is basically kind of color code the curriculum into 3 different areas. Lessons on, who's behind the information in green, lessons on what's the evidence, evaluating evidence in red, and then lessons on that in yellow on what do other sources say. And I'm just going to do a very slow, hopefully not to make anyone ill, a very slow, slow scroll down where you can start to see some of the lessons that they provide. And it goes on. The first lessons have to do with this lateral reading, this idea of taking a look at, one source, but not just relying on that. That whole idea is learning how to not just kind of do vertical reading in one site, but look at one site, but then look at what other sites or other media is saying about that topic. Such a good strategy for becoming more confident in this area. And those are a lot of those. We will move into what is the evidence, evaluating the evidence as well. claims on YouTube, Facebook arguments, evaluating claims on social media, argument analysis. These are all ones that you can use. Let me just pull up an example of a Facebook argument. And also too, many of their lessons are level 2. They have kind of a level 1 and a level 2, so they can be leveled for your specific classroom. And this is just an example of one of their lessons and assessments. And they're very compact. This one is basically taking a look at an argument where there's a conversation on Facebook. And in this task, students are presented with two posts from Facebook conversation and asked to explain which contains better evidence. So again, yeah, here's one part up here, here's another part down here. This can be projected, this can be sent to students, this can be printed out and given to students for a classroom discussion.
John,
Yes.
I am just going to interrupt you for a moment. You wanted a time check, and we have
Please.
about 17 minutes.
Wow, time
And
is-
I'm glad you said, because the civic online reasoning for programs where students have low or no technology, I put in the chat box, you can print out these materials and students can still work with informational literacy. So we know that not everybody has technological
Yes.
technology available, but there are a lot of options.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes, thank you for printing or for chatting that out. And yes, kind of just going back over, I know we reviewed quite a few resources in the last 5 or 10 minutes, but most of those, yeah, definitely for either programs or students with little or no technology, this can all be done by printing activities out with them. Yeah, I'm just trying to think back over all of most of these. Yeah, definitely are not just technology based, and especially this one too. Yeah, you can print out the lessons and resources. Yeah, good, thank you. So this highly recommend, and I have used this or many of these lessons with students, and they're up to date. They're about topics, and they're from platforms that they're using. So the connection is there. It's like, oh yeah, they're used to Facebook conversations. They're used to these conversations. So the topics that are presented are so relevant and provide such good discussion, and then also such good literacy media skills as well.
There is a question that came up that I'd like to bring forward that maybe you can answer, John, from Bonnie. What is the timeline turnover between real-time current events and available resources in civic online reasoning? She points out that News ELA was quick to report on the January 6th siege at the Capitol.
Good point. Yeah, News ELA, excellent at those up to date. Yeah, civic online reasoning, it's not a real time website. Yeah, it's not a real time one. It is more, I'm sure it will be, as they keep building this website, but it is more recent events. Yeah, this is definitely a fairly new curriculum that they've put together. So yeah, the resources they use will not be real time, but they will be ones that are definitely in recent time and not going back 10 years. It's like, I have to explain what this is to begin with, plus all that has to do with civic online reasoning. Yeah, good point. Thank you for that question. Yeah, many other thoughts. All right. So in our remaining time, our time does go by. I just want to make a few points and then maybe just give a little time for a little breakout. I just want to mention 2 more resources and one other way of approaching media or information literacy. That whole reminder that fake news can come in many forms, and the idea to find or to build those literacy skills, not only with students in the written form, but also visuals, graphs, and that type of thing. New York Times Upfront Magazine, that is a subscription that a school or district or program does need to get. It's a pretty sizable subscription and may or may not be an option, but they have so many good not only editions, but lessons and lesson plans and graphic organizers and that type of thing, devoted videos to fake news. If that is something your program uses, yeah, definitely go with or think about that resource. But also for free, the New York Times Learning Network has, if we want to make our students more confident readers, so to speak, of graphics information, graphs, charts, pictures. They have a wonderful consider what is going on in this picture or graph. Every week, the New York Times Learning Network posts a new graph, posts a new picture, and it's free. And it's a way then to really develop students' critical information skills in graph reading, in visual reading, all for free. And the pictures are, yeah, they're really good, and it really generates some really, really good discussion as well. So consider both of those when thinking about fake news, the visual form, the graphic form versus just the written word form. All right. So there is so much floating out there, and there are many other information literacy advocacy sites. There is Media Literacy Now. It's just a great repository of more resources, more ideas, more strategies. And as I've mentioned many times, today's resources can be found for sure on the resource list that is provided to you as well. And also, please don't forget the Atlas Online Resource Library. Many of these resources, not only for social studies, but other content area and what we've talked about today can be found on that as well. The best resource we can have is each other, of course. And remember, always, we went through many in a short amount of time, but please go back, choose one or two, become comfortable. We don't need all those bells and whistles or every single resource used for our classrooms, but yeah, find a couple, take a look and find a couple, get comfortable with those and apply those in your classroom. So we maybe have 5 minutes to do a few breakout rooms and just chat about the following. I just want everyone to kind of be able to chat to each other a little bit, and then we'll come back for our last 5 minutes and have any final questions or thoughts. But in our breakout rooms, what successes and challenges have you had teaching information literacy? Is this a new area to teach in your classroom, perhaps? Maybe think about some of the resources and how you would use them in your classroom, or share with each other any other strategies or resources that you know of. I've put up some today. There are so many more out there, and ones that that would be useful when teaching information literacy to our adult students.
And thank you to Andrea, who has posted those questions from the slide into the chat. So when you get in your chat rooms, you will have access to those questions.
Yeah, so should we do, please, maybe just 5-minute chat rooms, and then we'll come back and have a few minutes to sum up everything.
Sounds good. I'm about to open all rooms. So they're set for 4 minutes, but you will get a 60-second warning. So you'll have 5 minutes in your room.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead and open those up and see you all back here in 5 minutes.
Andrea, could you drop a couple folks here into a room?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm so glad you're doing this part.
There we go.
Thank you.
So it looks like everybody is in the room. Of course, I had all of the rooms set up perfectly. Oh, this makes me mad.
What happened?
I had all of the rooms set up and then people dropped out. So that's frustrating. But we could have our own breakout room here with the people who are in here. Still got 2 minutes left.
We can. John, yeah, no, John's doing really well with time.
Andrea, do you want to pause the recording?
And John, it looks like you are muted.
Am I back?
There you are.
There I am. Sorry about that, everyone. Yes, yes, you probably thought, oh, John is, he's gone off into the world of fake news too much. But yes, so this is a time, anyone, and I'll ask Christine again. Thank you, Andrea, for doing the breakout rooms. And, just some final thoughts as we get into our last couple minutes here. Yeah, any final thoughts or anything you want to chat into the chat box from your small groups? I know it's just a brief amount of time, but hopefully, some of these resources you can explore a little bit more. You can see how they will work in your classroom and use them there for sure. So just a final thought.
John, you want to reshare your screen or reshare your PowerPoint?
Let me do that. Let's see. Yes, I just kind of completely went out of everything. Let me go there. Oops, hold on one second, everyone. Okay. Things were going. There we are. Am I back now?
Not yet.
Yeah, wonder what.
Do you want me to share my screen? I have it. Yours pulled up.
Would you mind sharing that final thought? Yeah, I hate to not go away without our final thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There you go. Has everybody seen that?
Let's see.
All right, John, you're good to go. The final thought is up.
Very good. Thank you. So the final thought, everyone, is just this, that all of us, no teachers, just all of us in general, have that obligation to establish the accuracy of a piece of information before passing it along. And I thought that was just kind of a good final thought. This was an article that was just in last week's paper about how fake news can damage our psyche. And what better time? And this was in that article. And please, keep that in mind. And as just the final thought, all of us should ask, what do I know? What do I need to know? How do I know what I know? And is there any other way to look at this? In that association, the Media Literacy Association for Educators site, there's a wonderful checklist for us that we can modify for students of things to consider when approaching any type of mass information.
Thank you, John. I'd just like to say that I did post a link to the flyer in the chat, and the next session starts at 2:30.
Excellent.
I'd also like to say, and I'm doing this more and more, I'm chatting it again, people contact me with requests for social studies materials or requests about information literacy. Please do so if you would like a virtual introduction to John, and that's what I do. I introduce and then off you go and you can communicate, and John always has so many resources to share. So either contact John directly, or if you forget to do that, you can always contact me and I'm happy to make the introduction.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, John.
Very good. Thank you all for attending. And yes, good reading, good evaluating out there for everyone. And it's something that's happening every day. But please, yes, as Christine said, feel free to reach out to me, and I will be glad to answer any questions or be of any assistance in information literacy, or especially any other area of social studies as well. All right.
So just reminding everybody, definitely check out the participant folder, because you can find the slides with all of those resource links in there.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and yeah, the slides are there, and also a resource list with those as well, pulling those out.
Andrea, will you stop the recording?